This is Andrew Abrams from Out of the Box Technology, and Barbie Fiddler's also on with us. And we're Intuit Premier Reseller. We have been for well over a decade now. So that's been awesome for us as a company. And in the QuickBooks space, we had numerous customers that had recurring invoices and issues with getting paid and collecting on accounts receivable, and asked us a couple of years ago if there's a better solution out there that'll handle that, but still allow them to stay in QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. And we didn't find one, so we said, how about if we build it, will you use it? And that began our journey for Recur360. We launched it at QuickBooks Connect in 2016, and we were one of the finalists in the Intuit Premier Reseller App Showdown, where we came in second place there. And then in 2017, when we launched it on the app stores, we got into the contest for the QuickBooks Connect $100,000 App Showdown and became one of the top 10 finalists there. And we didn't win, but it was a great experience for us, you know, and as an app showdown, and then also launching a new product in the QuickBooks space. So just a little bit of background on what Recur360 was built for. So now the question is, what does it do? So Recur360 does four main things. It's a recurring invoicing or recurring payments, as well as a collections platform. And then it also allows you to integrate with alternate credit card processors in the event that you can't use Intuit payments for your particular type of business for whatever reason. Intuit doesn't approve everybody, just depending on their business type. So for businesses that aren't using Intuit payments, you can't use the any of the credit card processing capabilities that are built into QuickBooks Desktop. And a lot of larger enterprise class businesses are sometimes tied into their bank for their credit card processing, but they still want to do recurring and collect payments on their QuickBooks invoices. So we provide a payment gateway to QuickBooks. If they're using Intuit or if they happen to use something else, it still allows them to have overall the same functionality. So at a high level, in QuickBooks Desktop today, you would have to set up memorized invoices to process every month or whenever your interval is. And then if you were using Intuit Payments, you would have to set up a recurring payment within the Intuit Payments module. And the Intuit Payments module is a web-based platform, and QuickBooks Desktop is local. And while they sync together, your invoice that you memorize in QuickBooks is separate from the payment that you set to recur in Intuit Payments. And if you have to make a change to either, you have to change both. And then anytime it processes, you then have to download the payment into QuickBooks and then match it to a customer and their invoice. So there's a lot of manual processes involved with that, or double data entry. And then something else with QuickBooks Desktop is if you have invoices that are marked to be emailed, QuickBooks Desktop just throws them in the to be emailed queue. Oh, that's a payment, excuse me. So anything that's marked to be emailed will only be marked to be emailed once. So anything that's checked here will show up obviously in your send forms section. But after it sends it once, it's not going to send it again. And there's no real easy way in QuickBooks to mass send 1,000 invoices all at once with QuickBooks Desktop because it tries to send each individual transaction into either Outlook as a separate email or into Gmail as a separate email. So when you're trying to process hundreds or thousands all at once, even with a batch invoice, it'll lock up your QuickBooks and potentially crash it and not send all the emails. So we provide automatic emailing for invoices once they sync up into Recur360. So let's jump into Recur360 then. So within Recur360, it has a similar layout to QuickBooks Online. We offer QuickBooks Online Accountant View. So if you're doing bookkeeping for your clients, or if they want to have multiple accounts, they can have a single login and then have a list of all their accounts that they can switch into. Within Recur360, each account can be connected to a different type of QuickBooks. So typically this drop-down in QuickBooks Online is only for QuickBooks Online accounts. In our system, you could have one connected to QuickBooks Desktop and others connected into QBO. So I'll log into the one that's connected to QuickBooks Desktop. When you sign up for Recur360 and you're using QuickBooks Desktop, we connect through the QuickBooks Web Connector, which is a simple download file that you get from our website, and that is an XML file that basically tells QuickBooks how to log into Recur360 with the Web Connector in the middle, with all the credentials that it needs to sync data between the two platforms. So when you first sign up for Recur360, we pull over your entire customer list from QuickBooks, active and inactive customers. If they have balances due, we bring in their open balance. The open balance then shows on an invoice-by-invoice basis within our collection center. And so in our collection center, it will then match your open AR invoices, obviously in QuickBooks. So if you go into QuickBooks and you go to all open invoices, the balance here, and this only shows active invoices, would match every open invoice within the collection center. So if you just sign up for Recur360, and even if you're not doing a recurring invoicing and payments, all open invoice will come into Recur360. And then inside of here, once you're connected to a payment processor, you could either go ahead and process a payment here. Like I said, we connect into payments or authorize.net or a number of other services for processing. And then this will process the payments and automatically email the customer the paid invoice, and then automatically queue it to post into QuickBooks that received payment against the invoice. So there's no manual doing of anything other than initiating the payment internally if you want to initiate that. You can also schedule invoices to be emailed out. You can do them one by one, or you can do them in batch from our collection center by selecting all or just selecting a few. And so when you go in to schedule that, this is another feature that we have that isn't available directly in either the QuickBooks Online or Desktop product, is the ability to schedule it later on a specific date, or X days before or after the due date, or every X days starting Y days after the due date. So when you choose one or queue a bunch of them, we will then send reminder emails for collection purposes until you get paid, until they click on the Pay Online link that we have within our invoice emails to pay. So let me just go through one of those just to show what that looks like. So I'm going to just send out this email for Legacy Construction. And from within inside, I'll just go into scheduling it, and I'm just going to send this immediately. So while that's being generated, when you go into our settings for email, we have a couple options that allow you to manage how our Pay Online link enhances your business. So similar to QuickBooks, you can enable a Pay Online link, but also with ours, with the Pay Online link, you can enable it to show all past invoices within their account. So when they click on that link, they'll not only see the current invoices that they have a balance on, but they will also be able to see past invoices and do invoice resends. So I'm going to tell it in here that we're going to use Intuit for credit card and Intuit for ACH. Our system does allow you to have two different processors for each type of payment. So for instance, like with QuickBooks Online, they were offering $0 for ACH payments. So if you're a QuickBooks Online customer, you might want to use that. But if you're tied into your bank for credit card and they have authorize.net, you could potentially do that. Again, we're not trying to take away from Intuit as a processor, but we are offering those alternates for those that can't get approved by Intuit. So if these settings are enabled, then when the customer gets that email, they will get two things. One will be a very Uber-like email to show what it is that they were getting billed for. and then any balance due. Okay, and then it will also give them a very generic PDF, similar to QuickBooks Online, that they could print and file away, or print and then mail you a check if they weren't going to automatically pay you. So they get both of those with that email, and then they have the click here to view your invoices and pay them online. So when they click that, they can see these are the current open invoices, but they can also see all past invoices as well, and then they could resend themselves a copy of that. So one of the unique things with our Pay Online link, aside from seeing your open invoices and your past invoices, is that people can choose from the link to pay one or all of their open invoices, as well as the balance that they do want to pay on that. So let's say they only wanted to pay $500 on this one and $400 on this one. Our system allows them to do that. And then when they enter in their payment information down here, which I'm going to go ahead and do, let me just get a copy of Intuit demo credit card real quick. Just one moment. So let me grab that. This will also update their payment information in our system and allow your customers to manage their own payment information. So if you keep credit cards on file on QuickBooks Desktop today, the customer has to either give it to you over the phone, or they have to fill a payment form out that you would keep on file for PCI compliance, which really isn't very secure, because if they're giving it to you over the phone, or a staff member, or for one of your customers, somebody's got to write it down or key it into QuickBooks. Or if they're sending you a form and you file that away, there's a document on that. So with ours, we don't actually store the credit card information in our system. We pass it over to the processor, which then sends a token back to us, which we store. So now that I've entered that in and I go ahead and submit this, it's actually going to process two separate payments, one for each invoice. It's going to automatically email the customer that they updated their credit card, that they paid those two invoices. I'll get a copy of that, and then it'll also queue that to post into QuickBooks. So those were successful. And now automatically on the screen, I see that it updated the current amount due. So they'll see that immediately. This was the original amount, and this is now their balance due. I then got a copy of each of those emails that they updated their payment method with that information, and then they paid each one of these invoices. And it shows what the amount paid was and then what the current balance due is. So then within our system, if I go into our Sync Center, I'll see that those payments are queued to post into QuickBooks, and then the next time that the web connector runs, which is every 30 minutes, it's going to go ahead and grab those transactions and bring those received payments in, which we'll see momentarily. And then it automatically applies them to the invoice that it was intended against. So even if you have the setting in your edit preferences to automatically apply payments in QuickBooks, ours tells it exactly which one to apply it to, rather than it applying it to the first one. And then because we're sending in two separate payments, actually, they're only linked to their invoice ID, so there's no chance for a mix-up. When a payment comes in from Recur360, down in the memo field, it references what our transaction ID was, as well as the payment transaction ID, and then the payment processor's approval code and authorization code, which we then also throw into the reference field. If you're using Intuit Payments, you can look up the payment from inside of QuickBooks once it passes over, because we do pass over all of the metadata, which is why this is grayed out. So through the Intuit Payments API, it passes it into QuickBooks Desktop or Online as if it was processed there. So that kind of covers what our collection center does, from creating invoices in QuickBooks, syncing them into Recur, and then using Recur to send out the Pay Online link. And the real benefit of doing something that way is if you're a T-Sheets user and you're doing time and materials invoices, you can let T-Sheets or whatever application you use drive data into QuickBooks. you would create your time and materials invoice in QuickBooks, and then you would just let it sync up into Recur, and then you would send them all out of Recur with our Pay Online link and let Recur manage your collections that way. So then back to the intent of the program is we wrote this for recurring invoices. So again, rather than setting up a memorized invoice in QuickBooks or a recurring sales receipt in QuickBooks Online, you would set up a recurring invoice in Recur360. And on our recurring invoice, you can define what a template name is or a description of what this is. You can define your own interval. So you could run it every month on the first of the month. You could run it every 2 months on the first of the month so that you're invoicing 6 times a year. You could run it every 4 months on the first of the month or the 5th of the month. So basically, you can define whatever your interval happens to be. I'm just going to set this back to every 1 month on the first of the month. And then the start date is when this is going to start processing. But a key feature that we have is you could enter in a recurring invoice and start it today, and it'll prorate it for the rest of the month, for the rest of July. And then starting August 1, it'll then charge full price. So a key feature that proration in Recur360 adds to QuickBooks, because you can't automatically prorate your initial invoices in QuickBooks. You do have to manually calculate them. So you'd have to create a transaction, then memorize it, and then run the transaction, and then edit it for the prorated adjustment that you manually calculate. So again, you're doing double entry if you're trying to prorate something. Because we can store multiple payment methods, you can choose which one they want to use for this particular transaction. So they could have ACH on file, they could have credit card on file, you could have it connected to different processors, so I'll just use the one for Intuit here. And then we also allow the capability to generate the invoice on the date that it generates on, so the first of the month, but then process the payment 5 days later. So this works really well for customers that are on ACH, where you invoice them on the first, but you want to give them like a 5-day grace period to make sure that they have money in their bank. So we have customers that are in the salon rental business where they're renting chairs to stylists, and stylists live primarily off of cash in their bank. So they don't always have money on the first of the month. So for that company, they'll create the invoice on the first, and then it'll send them an email saying, here's your monthly rent on the first of the month. And just so you know, we're going to take the money out of your bank account via ACH on the 5th. And so it allows them the time to get the money in there. And this is very similar to a lot of utility companies or Verizon or internet companies, where they'll send you your statement on one day and then tell you this is the day the payment's going to come out. So this feature doesn't exist in either QuickBooks Desktop or Online. Like in QuickBooks Desktop, if you're doing Intuit payments, you can set your payment to process on whatever date you want, and then the invoice to process on whatever date. But again, you're configuring those manually. Ours allows you to configure that on a transaction-by-transaction basis. So our next checkbox is to automatically send invoice and payment emails to the customer. Yes.
Hey, Andrew, sorry to stop you here for a second. We do have a question from Jerry. Can a client with multiple QBO accounts use one Recur360?
They can use one Recur360 login and then create separate Recur360 accounts within their login, and then connect each one of these Recur360 accounts to a separate QuickBooks Online file. So for every QuickBooks Online subscription or every QuickBooks Desktop QBW file, you need a separate Recur360 account, but they could all be linked to a single login in our system, a single sign-on. And then for QuickBooks Online accountants, we are offering QuickBooks Online accountant pricing at 20% off, where we'll bill you at 20% off for all of your accounts that you connect, that you manage for bookkeeping or accounting, and then you can bill your customer what you want. Or if it's just you're signing up a customer and they're going to be paying their own bills and they have multiple QuickBooks, they would create multiple accounts within their single sign-on if that's what they were looking to do. So let me know if that didn't answer your question, Jerry. You can put it in the chat, and then Gina will let me know. I can't see what's in the chats right now.
We do have a couple more questions, Andrew, if we want to pause for a minute. So one that came in through email, actually. What happens if the client has a payments approved by us? Do we lose the payments residual to Recur360 as the processor?
No, you don't lose anything. So one of the main reasons we built the system is that whoever the payment processor is, and in the case of Intuit, you'll sign them up for Intuit Payment Services if they don't have it already. And once they have it, we're just connecting this directly into Intuit Payments. So we're really kind of the director of the transactions. We generate the invoice. We then tell Intuit Payments to process the payment, and then we automate the email, the invoice generation, the payment generation, and writing it into QuickBooks. But it's still your customer's merchant account, and whether they signed up through the IRP channel and signed up on their own, we have no impact on that. We're just making the connection. So you still own the customer for whatever, QuickBooks Desktop or online. You are attached to their payments account. We're not taking any of that over from any type of commission standpoint. We're just allowing a better way of transaction generation and accountability for all of that. And you said there was a couple other questions,
yes,
Rebecca?
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. Maybe you answered this. Are we still able to sell merchant accounts through your Recur application?
Yeah, well, you would sell them through the IRP channel. So when you sign somebody up for QuickBooks and you sign them up for Intuit Payments, that process stays the same. Once they have their Intuit Payments account and you've connected it to their QuickBooks Desktop or their QuickBooks Online, then inside of Recur under our payment processors, now I have Intuit connected. Right. But if it was something that wasn't connected like Elevon, you would just have a button here that says connect to Intuit. It would ask you to put in your Intuit Payments credentials, and that's it. So we're not involved in the sale process of Intuit Payments as a processor. You would still do that like you normally do. It's just we're linking to it once the account has been activated.
Okay. And then Barb is answering some of the questions, but I just wanted to verbally ask them so everybody can hear Jerry's follow-up question. So it would be $59 per account. Barb said yes, $59 per QuickBooks account it's connected to. And then there was another question, what if we have one QuickBooks file and multiple bank accounts, can we specify money received for a specified customer to be posted to a specific bank account? And Barb answered that Recur360 would post a payment to that customer against that invoice. It would put the payment into undeposited funds account, and you still make the deposits in QuickBooks to put it in the proper account. So I don't know if you wanted to show that, Andrew, or not.
Yeah, so inside of QuickBooks Desktop, there's a preference under, I think, payments that use undeposited funds as the default deposit to account. Okay, so if you have this set, then in your receive payment screen inside of QuickBooks, when you go to receive a payment, it doesn't allow you to choose where does this payment go, okay? So because everybody sets up their QuickBooks differently, we've set it up that we always hit undeposited funds regardless of what the setting is set at, so that when the received payment comes over, it's automatically linked that it's sitting in undeposited funds so that you can go to your banking and make deposits and see all of your payments being waiting to deposit. And the reason you want to use undeposited funds, specifically if you're using Intuit Payments, is that it will automatically put in the batch sequence for Intuit Payments so that you don't have to figure out what went into each particular batch. So that's the reason to use undeposited funds. In addition, if you have other channels where you're getting paid by check or credit card, it's easier if they go into here and then you click off which ones you want to go on the deposit slip, right? And then choose what your bank account is you want to put them into. But if you don't want to do it this way, which is fine, once it hits QuickBooks as a payment, you could edit each one and put it into whatever bank account you want. But if you choose to take this payment out of undeposited funds and manually redirect it into a particular bank account, then potentially your bank recs won't match your bank statement, because your bank deposits are going to be what the value of the batch is, which are going to be number of credit card charges or ACHs all put into one deposit slip. So if you redirect each one of these payments into your bank register, you won't be able to directly reconcile it through online banking matching or even your month-end bank rec. So that's why we hit undeposited funds. And then once it's in here, you can do what you want with it. Leave it in there and then go to banking, make deposits, and then deposit it into whatever bank account you want. Or on a received payment by received payment basis, you could redirect it into a particular bank account once it hits QuickBooks. We may add the feature later where within the recurring invoice itself, you'll be able to choose down here, do you want it to go into undeposited funds or a particular bank? But we haven't added that yet just because there's more complexity to it. So anyway, we hit undeposited funds and you can do with it what you want once it hits QuickBooks. Other questions, or otherwise I will move on?
No, keep moving on.
Okay. So you can choose if you want to automatically send this invoice or payment email. With a number of businesses, they may not want to send this out. Like, it could just be automatically auto-generating. And while it'll hit that customer's credit card or bank account, they may not want an email to them. So for whatever reason, you can enable that or disable that within our system. And then if it's a recurring invoice and there is no payment on it, meaning they're going to pay you via check, or if the payment fails because the credit card got declined or there was something wrong with the bank information that you inputted, you can set our system on each transaction to automatically send an overdue notice once or every day starting, X days after the due date, where the due date is driven based on their terms in QuickBooks. So if they have net 15 terms, whatever day this processes on the invoice, being August 1 is the next one, then if they don't mail me a check that I log into Recur360 or QuickBooks to receive a payment, or if they don't click the Pay Online link, then starting on the 16th, it'll start emailing them, or starting on the 20th, in this case, because the due date's on the 15th, it'll start emailing them until they pay me. So it's a good way to nudge your customers or annoy them to pay you. Because a lot of times, like, I'll get an invoice from my utility company that I have to log in and enter my payment info because they don't actually have it automated. And I'm busy and I forget about it, but they never keep reminding me to do it. They just tell me we're going to cut off your services because you didn't pay. So ours takes another approach. We're just going to keep emailing them until they do pay you, rather than, threatening them because they didn't. So we have this capability that, again, doesn't exist natively in QuickBooks Desktop or Online. So one of the big features of our system then that I mentioned earlier is the ability to prorate the first invoice. So let's say we want to process this invoice on the 1st of every month, and the start date is normally August 1, but I want to process an invoice today. So today being July, what's today, the 18th? Or the 19th, so we'll process this today. So we want this to start on July 19th, and I want to prorate the first invoice, okay? Then within each item that I have, so first off, we pull directly from your items list in QuickBooks. So whatever parts are in the QuickBooks item list, whether they're service, non-inventory parts, or inventory parts, you can search for them in our system, assign the class to it, set your quantity and your price, which automatically updates the amount. And then we also have dynamically driven item descriptions, which is unique to our platform, that will say you can drag and drop these pieces of code into your item. You could also code that directly into the item list in QuickBooks. so that when you're creating your items in QuickBooks and they sync into Recur, they'll load in with the sales description automatically coded for our system to recognize to insert the invoice date and what other, automated fields we have to create a dynamic item description. So for a lot of people that are in a monthly recurring like voice or internet service, this will say this covers the invoice date to the day before the next day we invoice you, and then your next invoice will process on this date. So we have dynamically driven item descriptions, but then you can also say, I do or I don't want to prorate this item, so that down below within the invoice here, you can see if it's being prorated or not. So right now, because I clicked prorate, it's going to automatically prorate the items that I had on this recurring invoice. So it's showing us what the amount is, not including tax. Now, another feature we have within the proration is let's say you're charging a setup fee, and that setup fee, even though we want to charge it today, we don't want it to recur, and we don't want that setup fee prorated. So I can go to that item that's on here, and I can say, don't prorate this, and then also delete this from the recurring invoice after it processes once. So again, in QuickBooks Desktop, if you set up a memorized invoice, it's going to process, but then if you want to change it, you've got to go to it and run it, delete the items off or modify them, and then rememorize it. This, because I'm checking this checkbox, is going to process this for the full 45. It's not going to prorate it. And then that item's going to show down here that this is what the cost of the first invoice is going to be with any prorations on it. And this is what the balance will be on all future invoices when this is removed, taking into account sales tax. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and submit this transaction to queue it. And because I dated it today, it says today is the next day it's going to run. Otherwise, it would show the first of the month or whatever your interval is. And then if I want it to process immediately, I can go ahead and push transactions, or I can let it run at its normal recurring time, which I believe is just 1 in the morning. So for right now, I just want to go ahead and push that transaction because I'm setting it up today with a proration and a setup fee, and I want my customer to get that initial invoice, and I want to receive payment on it. So when you push transactions, anything that's queued to happen on today, or if you backdated it, it'll generate the invoice. It'll try to generate the payment through your payment processor. It will then automatically queue it to email to the customer, and then it'll throw it into our sync status to send over the invoice and or payment if there was a payment attached to it, to send it into QuickBooks. So again, this would sync on its own. I'm just going to let that run. And then I'm going to go into my mail here where I'll see that that invoice was generated. So on here, I see, here's the prorated monthly fee. Here's the non-prorated setup fee. Here's the prorated landscaping fee. Now, I didn't have this set to process a payment, so here's the balance due. And they could click here to go ahead and pay it online. And then if I go back to that recurring transaction now, I'll see that setup item is no longer on there. So now that's been omitted from the item. So because we do QuickBooks Desktop hosting or QuickBooks Online Wholesale, sometimes we'll throw in those setup fees or we'll prorate the first month. So we really built this for our own purposes, but we found a lot of clients do things similar, so that works real well for them. So that's basically recurring invoices. Then we also have a feature called recurring payments. So a recurring payment could be, I'm just going to charge you on the first of every month for a particular amount, or let's just say weekly. We're going to charge you every week on Monday, $200. So we're going to go ahead and automatically process that, and let's say we're going to just charge you $100. So what this will do, and again, we will tell it to go back to the 16th so that I can actually run that today. It will process a received payment and then send them a payment receipt and then post that payment as a unapplied received payment in QuickBooks. So in QuickBooks Desktop, you can't memorize received payments. There's no way to memorize it here. You can create a recurring payment inside of the credit card or the Intuit recurring payments module, but then it'll process it, and then you still have to download it and choose what to do with it once it hits QuickBooks. So with Recur360, we can mimic that same behavior where this will process that received payment and just push it in as unapplied, and then in QuickBooks you could create your invoices off of time and materials and then apply the payment. But then something we also offer is, instead of you just bringing it in as an unapplied payment, you could choose to put it against an existing open invoice. So for instance, this invoice has a balance of $40 on it. And let's say you and the customer agree, well, they can't pay you immediately. Let's say that was $400. Then you say, that's fine. How about you pay me every Wednesday of every week? Okay. And you can just pay me $10 at a shot. So you can create payment plans against open invoices, and then it'll keep processing that payment on that interval, send them a paid receipt updated with what their new balance is currently, and then it'll automatically write that payment into QuickBooks. So I'll go ahead and tell this to process that way as well. And it's going to do $10 a week starting yesterday, so I'm going to go ahead and push that. And again, these would automatically run. I'm just trying to show them as we're doing them so that if you needed to set something up and run it right away, you can do that within our system. So while that's running, when it's done, it'll queue it. So it ran. I'll get an email in here in just a second with that sales receipt. Just refresh my email real quick. And then once that gets through emailing, they'll get an updated copy. Something I should also mention then is we use a platform called SendGrid to send all of our emails through. So we have what's called an email history report, where you can see every email that was sent out of the system, what type of email that it was, and whether it was delivered, whether they opened it, and whether they clicked on any link in it. So you get this functionality somewhat in QuickBooks Online, where within a particular transaction, it'll show you somewhat of the tracking information on it. And then obviously, if you're in QuickBooks Enterprise, and you're in a customer and you send an email out of here, it'll show you the sent email, but it doesn't know if they opened it or did anything with it. So our system does track that. But it also shows you all future pending emails. So I can see all the emails that are queued, either because I set them on the recurring invoice or I sent out mass emails through the collection center. And it will queue these to send out on these days, unless the invoice gets paid ahead of time. And if it gets paid ahead of time, then before this sends on this particular day, it'll automatically cancel. But you could also manually cancel it from within here. And if you go into a particular transaction and scroll down in that transaction history, it'll show you all of the emails generated against this transaction. And then it shows the pending one at the top, which you obviously could cancel. And then it would also show any scheduled payments against that invoice that are waiting to process so that you can see when your automated future payment is going to happen. With that, and I'll kind of jump around into some reporting, but inside of a customer, when you set somebody up, let's say you haven't invoiced them yet, but you want to send them a link to enter their payment information into their account. So from when it's in their user profile, you can just send the customer an email, please update your payment info. So that will queue it to send. So when they get that email, they'll just have a pay online link that doesn't have any balance due on it. unless they have open balances. So they'll get this friendly email with whatever verbiage you put in it, and it's not on an invoice, but when they go to click on that, they can either just update their payment information and store it to the account so that you have it ready for all future transactions, or should they have an open invoice, they could pay that, and then if you have the checkbox to show past invoices, they could go in there and resend them. So we have that capability of setup. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, while you're there, Jay was asking about potentially white labeling Recur360 or being able to kind of customize what the screen would look like. And I mentioned we don't white label the Recur360 itself, but this page can be customized with his logo.
Yes. Yeah, so whatever you put into the email template settings would show on that page. So right now I've got our demo dev info, and then I've got this logo. But whatever logo you load here, whatever information you show in the company details is what's going to show on this screen, and then also show within the invoice and the bottom of the email. So that all is going to show you. The only thing that we still maintain is at the bottom of the emails that go out is that it just went through our system. Or obviously, if they're on our site, it's going to say they're in the Recur360 platform and that it's powered by us. But it'll have all of your contact information up here. And likewise, you could add additional information on your email templates. So if we scroll down, you can create your own verbiage. You know, so if there's a problem, please contact whomever you want to contact. And we have different verbiage for an invoice due message versus an invoice overdue versus an invoice paid or recurring payment. So you can customize the message that goes out within this section here. And then also in the customer message area, whatever you put inside of a recurring transaction will show up on their invoice as well. So in QuickBooks, if you put something in the customer memo field, whatever you put down here does not show up on the customer invoice. You have to put it in the customer message, and then QuickBooks caches every variable of those customer messages. You could potentially have hundreds or thousands in here. So rather than us doing that, whatever you enter into down here in the customer message only pertains to just this customer, which also could be that dynamic description, but it could be anything you want to put in. And this could be a remit to address, or if you have an issue, contact us here. And then that will end up in the body of the email, but also in the PDF as well. So when they open that up, again, it'll be branded as you. So your logo, your information, and then at the bottom of that, whatever the customer message was would show within here. And then if they have a future scheduled payment, like I showed with the invoice date split from the payment, it would let them know on here when it's going to process automatically. So yeah, so this is all customizable within our settings inside of the email settings. So you're basically not white labeling it, but your customers will only see your information. Another feature that we have is within the customer center. If I go into a particular customer, something you don't see in QuickBooks Desktop or online is what are their recurring transactions. So if you go into a customer in QuickBooks, you only see transactions that have happened when you're looking at the right panel of that customer. This only shows what's happened. If you were using memorized transactions, then you'd have to go here to see what's the next memorized transaction. And if you were using Intuit Payments for your recurring, you'd have to go to the recurring module to see what the recurring is. So you're basically looking in three different areas to see what's happening in the future. So in Recur360, when you're within a customer, it's going to show you these are their next recurring invoices or payments. And then you could click on this and it'll take you directly into that so that you could potentially edit it or delete it or do whatever you want with it. Likewise, you could also duplicate this right from here and then assign it to another customer to make that automatically recurring for somebody else, and then just modify it based on whatever you would change for that other customer. So we allow you to quickly memorize the transaction for somebody else, similar to QuickBooks, but you can do that within an existing recurring. You don't have to go and edit a past one, but you can also do that from a past one. But then also within the customer account, it will then show you, the recent invoices. And if you go into the recent invoices, it will show you all of their invoices. And if any of them have any balances due, you could then click the process payment link, or you could send them an email with the pay online link. But also if there's any payments in here or invoices in here that process through our system, it shows you the processor that it processed through in the payment ID. So you don't see all of this information inside of either QuickBooks Desktop or online, or the ability to just go through one by one and process payments without having to edit the transaction and receive a payment. The QBO does have something similar to this, but Desktop doesn't. You actually have to go into the invoice or just go receive a payment against an open invoice to do that. So now if somebody's going to pay you via check, our preference is that you go into here and say they're going to pay you via check, and then just write that check over, and it'll process for that amount. And that way it allows our system to be the point of input, so it's always accurate. And then when you sync with QuickBooks, QuickBooks will just get updated that that payment was received in our system, and then it'll post again into QuickBooks into undeposited funds the next time that this runs. So
hey, Andrew, this is Rebecca. I just wanted to remind people to put their questions in if they have any. We have 10 minutes left, so you can definitely keep going. We don't have any questions right now, but I just wanted to remind people to put their questions in.
Excellent. So a few of the settings that we have related to payments is that you can set Recur360 to automatically email customers when the credit card is X days or months prior to expiration. So since we cache within a customer the tokenized credit card info, if you go to edit the customer, you'll see that this expires on January 1 of 2020. This is all encrypted, so if we ever got hacked, nobody would get any financial information relating to credit card or ACH. We are hosted on Google App Engine, so we're as secure as anything at Google's web services is, like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, because we tokenize and pass this through. This is all there is an encrypted token here. But because we do still track the expiration within the account settings, if they have a recurring invoice, then you have this set. This will send them a notification 2 months prior to their credit card expiring so that they can update it before the next recurring. But you can also look at that information for customers that don't have recurring payments, but that you want to keep active credit cards on file. Is we have a cards expiring report where you can say only show cards linked to active transactions that expire before 9 of 2020. And so that brings up that one credit card there. And then I could simply click here to send them an email to please update your credit card information. So, if you had a bunch of them here, it would send it. And it will only send it once. So if it's set to go out 2 months prior, it's going to send it once. And then it's not going to send it every day or anything. But it will queue it based on either the setting you put into the account settings or what you put here. And then again, they'll get an email that just asks them to update their credit card information. So it's a card expiring email, shows them what's on file and when it's expiring. And then again, if they click on this, it takes them to the same Pay Online portal where they could pay any open invoices, or they could just update their payment information, or again, they could look at past invoices as well. So a few other reports that we have is the invoice history. So this is the transaction log of every invoice we generated. When it hit QuickBooks, QuickBooks will then assign it a invoice number and then write it back into our system. And by doing this, we're not trying to tell QuickBooks what the next invoice number is, which can conflict with other systems, like if you're using Method or Fishbowl or anything else that's driving invoices in. We let QuickBooks tell us what the next invoice is. And then this shows you the payment ID again, and you could process payment here. We also have a received payment history. So for customers that pay online or payments that you initiate in here, this received payment report will then match to your QuickBooks received payments transaction log for whatever time period, once everything sinks in again based on the interval. Now with QuickBooks Online, it's immediate. There's no delay. It's automatic through the API. You don't have to click to sync it or do anything when you're with QBO. But desktop, you do have to make sure that the web connector is running on the computer that the integration was set up on. Then a few other reports would be scheduled payments. So this will show you future recurring payments and when they're going to happen. And then, like I said, we had email history, which shows past emails and pending ones. But then we also have an invoice errors. So any invoice that was generated where the payment failed, this will show you those specific transactions and why they failed. So the payment processor will pass back to us, it was a decline, or the card was expired, or it's just a bad card. So this is then your collections log on invoices that didn't process payments against them automatically versus the collection center, which is just all open invoices, regardless if you tried to automate a payment or manually enter one. So we have it broken out so you can look at things both ways. This report comes in handy when you're processing 10, 100, or 1,000 invoices on an interval, and maybe 1 or 2% of them fail. You'll get an email that says there were errors, and it'll bring you to here to show you each one of those errors. What else is there? So, I don't know, Barb, did I miss anything?
No, I just like the email history report because it shows me who opened the emails and who clicked on the pay online links inside of them.
Yeah, that does come in very handy. From a customer account standpoint, with QuickBooks Desktop, we sync all of the fields within a customer outside of job type. So if I grab my hosting customer here, all of these fields, their payment terms, their preferred payment method, their sales tax settings. We don't bring in customer type or rep right now, and we don't bring in job info. So when you edit an account in QuickBooks or edit an account in Recur, at the next sync, it'll sync wherever made the last update. On the left side of the customer edit panel. So billing, shipping, their payment settings, their tax settings, and we do bring in customer type and rep so that you can update it or assign it here. I forgot about that. We just don't attach to job type yet. They could have a parent customer, so we fully bring that over. And then, like I said, you can store multiple payment methods against multiple processors all within the account, which works well for like property management companies where it's one management company, but they may have a separate credit card or bank account they want to use for different properties, but they still want everything to come to them, and you're not treating them, each property, as a separate job. So we can allow you to store multiple different payment methods, and then on each recurring invoice, just define again which payment method they're going to use that's cashed to their account if there's more than one. So
this
as
is
a
great,
recap,
Andrew, thank you so much. Sorry, go ahead and recap. There are no questions, so go ahead and recap, and then we can end the call.
Yeah, so as a recap, we're trying to enhance the QuickBooks experience by replace what QuickBooks doesn't do well or add functionality that QuickBooks doesn't do at all, but still write all the invoices and payments into QuickBooks as if you had created them and set them up there. Or allow you to create time and materials invoices in QuickBooks, or have other systems like e-commerce carts bring their invoices into QuickBooks, and then sync those up into Recur so you can email them and manage collections on them out of our system in an automated fashion, both on the email notifications but also on the payment processing. Again, we can allow you to create recurring unapplied payments or recurring payments against an invoice and a payment plan. And then some better automated reporting that Barb mentioned, to see, did they actually look at the invoice, which you don't see in QuickBooks Desktop, but you do in online. So we're bringing some online features to desktop that aren't there, and then improving features in online that, again, QuickBooks doesn't do or doesn't do well. So we're not trying to replace QuickBooks. We're just trying to enhance the recurring or the collections module better than what's already there. And then, again, you would stay with Intuit Payments. We don't want you to leave them. But if you or your customer uses a different processor for e-commerce, or they're tied into their bank and their bank makes you use them for the processor, we can connect you through authorize.net to that processor. Or if they want to sign up for us, we do offer credit card processing that is separate from the platform. And those are for customers, again, where Intuit won't approve them, or they want a little bit better rates than whoever they're paying now. These are additional fees that we would charge on top of the platform if they were to sign up with us, but it's not a requirement. Again, you can stay with Intuit or use whoever you have that we can connect to.